Welcome to my library. I've been following bookish content on YouTube and Instagram for a while now, and I really enjoy seeing what other people post, different reviews or what they read, just keeping up with things. And although I have been posting on a faceless Instagram account, different book reviews and what I'm currently reading, I thought, why not join the actual community and start posting my own content to share with everyone in the universe what it is that I'm reading and what I'm up to. Some of my favorite genres are fantasy and romance, which go really well together, but actually my favorite subgenre of it all would be magical realism. I do read a lot of lighthearted fiction literature and romance books as I do read on commutes, so this helps really pass the time and you don't have to get too in-depth into a deep epic world, but I really do love lore and world building in fantasy books. So these are the books that I read in the month of February. You might be able to tell what they are by some of the sprayed edges. The first book I read this month was A False Start by Elsie Silver, and it is the fourth book in her Gold Rush Ranch series, which is a cowboy romance series. This book can be read as a standalone, or it can be read as the fourth one in the series, as each book in the series focuses on one couple. That's what this one does. It focuses on two characters, Nadia and Griffin. Nadia is a young adult woman. She has a bit of a hard past, a bit of abusive relationship with her father when she was growing up. This caused her to mature quite quickly. She's a bit of emotionally detached, I guess. She doesn't have a lot of friends. She doesn't have a lot of family, really only just her older brother. The male main character, Griffin, is her older brother's best friend. Griffin is a recluse. He doesn't really talk to that many people, so not only is the brother the best friend, he's like the only friend. Griffin used to be a football player, and a pretty good one, but he had an injury which led to a concussion, which gave him a speech impediment, so he has a stutter. As a writing device, this is really neat because as a reader, you can tell in situations if the character is nervous or calm just by the way that he's speaking. With a stutter, he's very self-conscious about the way that he speaks, so he's very intentional about the words he uses and when he talks. This book is a bit darker than previous books in the series, in my opinion. By no means is it a dark romance, but the topics on it are a bit more serious, with Nadia's past and the abusive relationship with her father, Griffin being a recovering alcoholic and just being a recluse, dealing with all of this, kind of hating himself for most of the time. Two characters in this, there is an age gap between them of 14 years, which in some situations might be a bit creepy, but because of her emotional maturity, it doesn't seem that weird. It is brought up a few times though as the second reason why they shouldn't be together. Not only is it the best friend's brother, but there's this age gap, and what are people going to think of that? The two characters develop a connection though, because they understand that not everything is sunshine and rainbows and things can get hard, and they bond over that in a sense. They open up to one another, and they're the few people who are actually able to understand what the other person is going through, and that's where the relationship is formed and built on, that emotional connection and that trust. I wouldn't recommend this as the first book to read from Elsie Silver, as it is the fourth in the series. I would recommend someone read the other ones first. The characters in this weren't perfect. They were very flawed. Because of that, they felt more real and relatable, and it might be my favorite one in the series. Next is another Canadian author. It is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Not only is she just Canadian, but she's actually from the part of Canada that I live in, and that just made it extra exciting. I will admit, this might have sat on my bookshelf for far longer than it should have before I picked it up. This is a fantasy romance book, and it takes place on an island called the New Republic. On this island, they hunt witches. They used to trust witches, but not anymore, so all the witches are hunted and gone rid of. Our main character, Rune, is a witch, but it is a secret. By day, she plays the role of this socialite, a bit of an airhead, a bit of a ditz, just mingling in the crowds. But by night, she plays the role of the vigilante called the Crimson Moth. She finds where witches have been captured, she saves them, puts him on a boat, and sends him off to someplace where they will be safe. The other main character is Gideon, and he is a notorious witch hunter. He's like one of the really good witch hunters, and Rune doesn't know much about him. There isn't much told about him. He's very mysterious. One of Rune's rescues goes wrong, and she doesn't end up saving the witch. She's too late. But she still actually wants to find where she's being held and save her. To get this information, she needs to do a bit of infiltration. And how does she do so? Why? By courting Gideon. Gideon is not only like a witch hunter, but one of her best friend's older brothers. Gideon has a slight suspicion that Rune might be involved in something, but he doesn't have any evidence. So both characters are courting each other, but also using each other for intel. And guess what? They end up actually liking each other. They learn more about each other than they expect. They develop this relationship, but they can't fully be one another around each other. There's these secrets that are holding them apart. Drama happens, stuff happens, world building happens. Don't want to give away spoilers, but it does get pretty interesting. And I would say, although it is a romance, there is still a decent amount of like action, like combat, exciting stuff, fantasy, world building. I read this book because I wasn't sure if I would enjoy it, and I knew the second one was coming out. I did enjoy it and immediately ended up getting the second book. However, this is a chronological duology. You do have to read the first one before the second one, otherwise you'll be totally confused. I would recommend it. The book itself isn't too big. This copy is the hardcover. It's about 400 pages. The font is fairly decent sized, so you can get away with it pretty quickly. And dual POV makes it interesting, also switching back and forth between the witch and the witch hunter. There's some deception, there's some tomfoolery. It's fun. Next up is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. First off, a lot of his books I find have these, if you can tell, where it's all rough on the edges. This is really neat. I find I like the texture feeling. It's terrible when you're trying to find parts or quotes that you've underlined, since it's hard to go through the pages, but while you're reading it, I just find that very satisfying. The main character in this book is Nora. She feels lost. She feels disconnected. She feels like there are a lot of opportunities that have passed her by and she's let pass her by, and she just feels very stuck and complacent with where she is in life. So depressed that she feels that if she were to pass, no one would even notice, that her existence hasn't had an effect on anyone around her. She could literally die and it wouldn't affect anyone's life going forward. And if she hadn't existed, it probably wouldn't have even affected anyone's life. In this book, the depression leads her to trying to take her life. Emphasis on the word try. Instead of actually ending her own life, she's sent to the Midnight Library, the odd place between life and death. This library is filled with thousands of books, and each book representing a different timeline, based on a decision that you made in your life. So if you wonder, what if I hadn't broken up with my high school boyfriend? What if I moved to that apartment in the city instead of the house in the suburbs? What if I bought that fancy sports car instead of my practical van? What if I went to college for this subject instead of this subject? What if I pursued playing soccer instead of doing guitar lessons? All those decisions represent different lives that would have been continued, and each of them is in a book in this library. Nora has the opportunity to think about any of those decisions. A book will be given to her. She reads a few lines from it, and it transports her into a world where that is the reality. Every decision that Nora thinks she regrets, she's able to see what would happen if she did the opposite. And not even just the major regrets, but little curiosities, little tweaks that may have sent her down different paths. What would happen in those futures? When she's sent to these realities, if she likes it, she will keep living there. And as time passes, more information will become memory, and she will feel less like an imposter living in that life until it actually is real. Or, if it's not what she wanted, when she feels true disappointment, she's then sent back to the library. But the library is an in-between place, so it doesn't last forever. The plot in this book was a bit predictable. From the beginning, I had a fair understanding of what would happen, what the main events would be, and how the ending would go. There were a few lines that I liked in the book, and I underlined as quotes. Doing one thing differently is often the same as doing everything differently. Makes you really just think about all the decisions that you've made in your life. You don't have to understand life. You just have to live it. The paradox of volcanoes was that they were symbols of destruction, but also life. Once the lava slows and cools, it solidifies and then breaks down over time to become soil. Rich, fertile soil. I never thought of a volcano as a symbol of life. I really like the way that this took on volcanoes, as I've never thought of them. This book isn't that big. It's just under 300 pages. Not too hard to read. There's very short chapters. It is a book that makes you think and reflect on your own life and your own decisions, but it's not too deep. You could read it if you're commuting or on the go. I do wish it was a little bit deeper. At some points, it felt almost surface level, and I felt that it could just delve a little bit more, but the concept of it was very interesting. I followed that book with Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. First, this cover is cool. It's got these sprayed edges that look like a caustic effect, like water, and then we got some art on the inside. You've probably seen this all over the internet if you're into the same types of books as me. I will preface this with saying the only other Ali Hazelwood book I've read is Not in Love, and from what I've heard, both of those books are on a more spicy scale, a bit more intense than her earlier books. This book is told in a single point of view from the main character, Scarlett. She's in post-secondary school, she's into chemistry, she's an athlete, she's a diver. Keeps to herself, she's quiet, she's very focused and very determined. She doesn't have time for friendships or relationships. In the first year of being an athlete at the school, she had an injury while doing a dive, and her body is healed physically, but she still has a mental blocker. It's kind of preventing her from doing this dive again, and that's something that she is struggling with overcoming so that she can continue being a competitive athlete. The male main character in this is Lucas. He is a captain on the swim team. He's an Olympian. He is pretty blunt and straightforward with things, but he keeps a lot to himself. So he'll be honest and upright. He just doesn't share a lot. It seems like they would have nothing in common, but then something's revealed and turns out they're both kind of into the same kink. Lucas had a relationship with the captain of the dive team, but it falls apart. They don't really talk about it publicly because they don't want to ruin both teams' morale. But because that fell apart, Lucas and Scarlett start this arrangement. They don't call it a relationship and they're not looking for a relationship, but they start a physical arrangement to get certain needs done. With this and with what they're into, it involves a lot of trust and a lot of trust in the other person. And because of this, they get to know each other and trust each other. Lucas's feelings, I think, are pretty obvious. He's a quiet and straightforward person, so sometimes we're not used to that. Scarlett is self-doubting it and herself the whole time. She's not really sure. She doesn't really accept it as easily, but they're both competing. They end up working on chemistry stuff together. There's some drama. There's some really intimate open door romance scenes. I enjoyed reading them. They were interesting. If you've read her other book, Not in Love, this is along that similar vein. Keeping in mind what I said about their relationship and what they're into and it being open door, it's pretty adult. It's like just under like 450 pages. I do this because sometimes you see the font and like the way that the words are put out. The chapters aren't too big. Sometimes they're just like a few pages. Sometimes they're closer to 10. I find chapter size matters a lot to me when I'm reading because if I'm doing other things or if I don't have a long time or if I'm on a commute and I might have to put a pause in it, I like to end at a chapter. So if you're prepared for that, I'd recommend reading it. If you're not into that and you like things closed doors and you like things vanilla, then maybe it's not the book for you. Then we move to The Dollmakers by Lynn Buchanan. This book, the cover, just it's what caught my attention. This is a fantasy book, not romantic, and it takes place in a fictional country called One. What I think is neat is the places, there's a map in here, and the places are called like the village called Twig, the city called Color, the forest called Deep. I don't know why it's worded like that. I think it's pretty cool and it really makes it feel fantasy and lore, like you're telling old tales. The book follows the main character, Sheen, and she is an aspiring doll maker. There's two types of doll makers. There's artisan doll makers that make toys for kids and families, things to help out around the house, and there are guard doll makers, which are more strong, like they guard the cities and villages. Guarding from what? Guarding from something called the Shod, which are these creatures that kill and devour. They seem very heartless, thoughtless, not that smart at times. They just destroy, and they take pieces of what they've destroyed and build on themselves. So Sheen wants to be a doll maker, and she wants to make these guard dolls to protect people. She lost her family to a Shod attack, so she wants to build guard dolls to protect other people. The book starts when she's doing a exam, or has like this sort of person come and evaluate if she's going to be a doll maker or not. And because her dolls are so beautiful and well put together and so much attention to detail, it's assumed that she wants to be an artisan. She wants to make like these beautiful dolls and sell them to rich people and in cities, when in fact she wants to be a guard doll maker. Her dolls don't look like normal guard dolls though, and she tries to make them and build them with intellect and smart, and so they can be more cunning, but it's just not what people are used to seeing. So she's not given a license to be a guard doll maker. Her master, who's taught her this craft, sends her to a place called the Village of Web, where he knows there's another doll maker who is a guard doll maker, who her dolls are slightly irregular too. People have thought they're ugly. People have mistaken them for these creatures called the Shod, and she's done a lot of suffering. So this master thinks if Sheen is sent where this other doll maker is on the other side of the land, learns from her, then she'll understand, figure out what she wants to do with her life. Sheen, though, has other things in mind. She wants to go to this village and take the guard doll maker's spot. She thinks if she can win in a competition or like dethrone her from being the guard doll maker of this village, then she'll be like, you have to give me a license now. The lore in this is pretty neat. Like the way that the world building is made, and these creatures and like their purposes and the history and these other lands that are briefly mentioned, I find it interesting and very fantasy. You just kind of like flow into it. What I don't like is the main character though. She's so stubborn, so annoying. It's hard to relate to her. You see her doing something, you're just like, stop, don't do that. Like, be cool, be chill. At some points, this book did get a bit slow in the storytelling, in the way it was wrote, and I'm not exactly sure, but there were parts where it felt like a lull, and I really had to push myself to read through it. This is Lynn Buchanan's debut novel, I think, and I think if this is where she starts, maybe she could do other books about this world, because it does say a novel from the Fallen Peaks. There was other countries mentioned and characters who we could run into in other books. Not my favorite, but I don't have regrets for reading it. It's also only like 380 pages. The font is small though, and there's a lot on all the pages, so it is a bit thicker of a read because of that. Yeah, I'm excited to see if she continues in this theme or in this world, if there's other countries and what their stories could hold. The last book I read this month is Scythe and Sparrow by Brynn Weaver, who I learned is also a Canadian author. This is the third book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. The Ruinous Love trilogy books do not need to be read in order. They can be read as standalones. However, for world building purposes, I would suggest reading the first, the second, and then this third book. Each book focuses on a different couple, but the couples from the first and second book do play secondary characters in here. They make cameos, and I just find that more rewarding when you actually have a relationship with them from previous novels. The story is told in dual POV from the two main characters. The first main character being Rose. She is part of a circus. She reads tarot cards at the circus, and she does the act where you ride around in a motorcycle around a giant globe. While she does these tarot readings, she learns about the people and the communities and the towns that they're passing through, and she is deeply impacted by survivors and people who are currently struggling with domestic abuse. She makes it a bit of her goal to try to help these women out of these situations. If you've read the two previous books, you know that they're about serial killers. So you can imagine Rose does this in one means or another. The story really starts when the circus is in one town. She is going through with one of these activities to help a woman, and it doesn't go successfully. She ends up in an accident, and she ends up bringing herself to a medical clinic where you meet Dr. Fionn Kane, and he helps her out, is unsure the whole circumstance, knows it's a bit sketchy, but offers her to stay at his place because the circus is going to leave town and she has a broken leg and she can't go with them. She stays and she heals. They get to know each other, develop a bit of a bond. They don't really have anything romantic for quite a large portion of the book, actually. Just this tension and this unknown. Then finally it hits and they connect, but they decide that it's going to be strictly about getting it done. They're going to set rules. It's not a relationship because when she's healed, she's going to go on the circus and she doesn't want to inconvenience this poor doctor with her extracurricular activities. But little beknownst to her, he has a darker side to him. He's actually been fighting it for a while and trying to be the better man and live this different lifestyle that doesn't suit him because he has that dark side. He understands Rose and understands her motivations, and he is super protective of her. Rose's character is spontaneous, outgoing, blunt, bold. It's really wild and fun, and Fionn is more reserved. He keeps to himself. He is more quiet in that sense, and when he does unleash his inner beast, it's really interesting and just full charge. The story is about them. Do they want to be together? Do they not? Are they gonna? What's gonna happen with these murders? Because, you know, Ruinous Love Trilogy, you always have to have serial killers. One thing I do like about this book, this is just with the way it was printed, is each chapter is told from the dual POV, and ones that are from Rose, Sparrow, have a little sparrow on the bottom corner, and the ones that are from Fionn Kane, Scythe, they have a scythe on the bottom. And the dual POV really gives you an inside look into each character's struggle as they are trying to figure out themselves and where they want to be in their life and who they want to be. I enjoyed this book. It's fun and playful, has a lighthearted approach to serial killers falling in love. I wouldn't say it's my favorite out of the trilogy, though. I would say that Butcher and Blackbird, the first one, was my favorite, although each of the books have a bit of a different spin, different characters, different personalities, different situations. If you enjoyed the trilogy, obviously keep reading and read this one. If you were going to read only one from this, I would say, yeah, read the first one, not this one, but this one, the characters are lovable, they are enjoyable. It's a fun adventure. So these are the 6 books that I read. I'm really happy that I was able to finish off this series and finish off this series. Dollmakers, there might be more, hopefully, maybe I'm just being hopeful. Deep End was a standalone. Midnight Library, also standalone, and Heartless Hunter now has Rebel Witch out, which I hopefully will be reading this next month.